Oh, good. Hey there, folks. Just testing out a little technology for just one moment, but I'll be right with you here in just a second. Waiting for a few more people just to join the live here. Thank you. Looking good. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, it is the top of the hour, folks. So it looks like it's time to get started here. Thank you for joining me tonight. Welcome to RD Exam Ready Live. My name is Zach Caseberg. I'm tutor, coach, guide, helping students to know about the RD exam, passing the RD exam. So I'm really excited that all of you are joining me here tonight because if you are, it just means that you want to learn about just how to be a little bit better in preparing for the exam. And I'm hoping that I can do that for you. For those of you that know me or don't, I've had a long history of tutoring students, working with students, educating students on the RD exam before. And really, what I wanted to do with this is just give another opportunity for students to get some free content. That's the big thing I want to do is provide some stuff free to you so that you can study along with me, get support, and feel more confident in yourself for exam day. So as we're kind of waiting for just a few more folks to come in, I'm just going to go and share this here. If you have not, make sure you check out the RD Exam Ready podcast. That's the podcast that I'm trying to do each week um, on all types of topics. I had a previous podcast called the Diet NPO podcast, which did similar type of material, and this has been kind of the newer show that I've been doing. So check out the podcast. We're doing it every week. Follow me on Instagram. You can message me through there if you have comments, you have questions, if you want to tell me about your past. I've had a lot of students doing that recently, which has been highly rewarding a lot of the time. And then on YouTube, obviously where we are right now, make sure you subscribe so that if we do go live again, that you know how to reach me. But really, just feel like you can reach out to me in any way if you want to. The big goal of this is just that we can, interact and kind of help each other out a little bit in this community. So that's my big goal. So you check that out there. All right, excellent. So we got about 10 of us in here right now. We're going to dive into our lesson today. Technology, if it fails us a little bit, we kind of know how that goes a lot of the time. So not to worry. I've dealt with that all the time of technology failing on me. So hopefully things hold pretty strong. And maybe in the future, I'm hoping to kind of upgrade things a little bit. make it so the chat can be a little more interactive with things. But tonight, if you're joining us, it means you want to go ahead and learn more about calculations. And specifically tonight, I'm going to talk about food service calculations. We can definitely have another session on clinical calculations in the future, but for today, I just wanted to focus on our food service ones tonight. And with that, the ones that I picked out for our calculations this evening is what I did was I picked about three of the hardest topics when it comes to calculations that I've worked with students on. Those topics are break even point, EPAP, and then the third one we're going to go through is selling price. So, what we're going to do is we're going to really take an in depth analysis, really go through these together specifically to kind of go through these topics, why students struggle with them, and give you an opportunity just to ask me some questions, should you have any, about that. Um, what I always recommend with this, we're a very welcoming group. So if you are afraid to put yourself out there, I'd say don't be. The big goal of this is that you learn about how you can do better on these types of questions. So we'll do a walkthrough of these three different types of calculations. And then with what time we have left, I have a bunch of just random calculation questions that we're all going to work on together. So definitely pop in that chat. I want to hear and see all of you kind of being nice and interactive as much as you can, just so we kind of know what questions you might have, and I'll get those addressed and keep an eye on that chat there. All right. Excellent. So before we dive in, with those of us that are hearing right now, how do you feel about calculations? Let me know in the chat. A little bit nervous about them? Do you feel strong with them and just want to get a little extra practice? Are you completely lost? Where are you in this process right now? What do you think? Nervous? Okay, Joanne, I understand that. Peyton's honest. So, Becky. Yep, yep, yep. Absolutely. And that's pretty understandable for where I see most of my students at. We have some of us maybe a little lost for one. I understand. Yeah, a little bit. Well, here's what I want to kind of say is if you think you're bad at math, remember you're not bad at math. You are just not where you need to be yet. If we say that we're always bad at math, then you may always remain bad at math all the time. And I don't think that's going to be the way for you students. I think that we can go through these a little bit and get some help as we kind of go through these here too. Okay. Yep, and Lorianne, I'll get that shared here in just a minute. So let's go ahead and let's dive in with our first thing here. Perfect, perfect. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, make sure the technology holds up pretty well here. So you should all see my screen here for break even point right at the top. So hopefully you all see that. It looks pretty good on my end here. So we're going to talk through break even point a bit. And I really, again, I want you to use that chat to communicate with me if I'm not being clear on something. So it looks pretty good here. All right, everyone, let's dive in now. So with break even point, what does it mean? Break even point is just the point in which we're breaking even, right? We're breaking even with everything is what we're kind of seeing there. And so as we're kind of looking at break even point a little bit, I'm going to give you some tips about how you can go about this process. One, always remember break even point has two formulas that you need to be familiar with for exam day. So make sure we're familiar with these formulas. Let's just take time to work on our first one and zoom in on this one here to start. So for Formula One, for break even point in dollars. So this is a question that is going to be saying, hey, what is the amount of dollars that we need to make to break even? That's all this is. So what is the dollar amount that we need to break even? And then our second formula is not how many dollars that we're going to need to make to break even. It's going to be more of the amount of units that we need to do to break even. So there's the big difference between those two formulas. One has to do with your units in the end will be units for this one, such as burritos, tacos, sandwiches, waffles, whatever it is. And for Formula One on the left side, that's going to be sale, kind of dollar amount. So dollar amount will be your unit for our other formula that we see here. Okay. For our Formula One, let's take a good look at this here. I've kind of color coded things a little bit to help us along. Our dollar amount in break even is equal to fixed cost, which is always on top. Fixed cost is always on top for these break even point questions. That's a good thing because a lot of us struggle with memorizing or knowing or how does this work. So, this is going to help you a lot of the time to say, hey, I know that fixed is always on top and it's going to be for break even point questions. On the bottom, we're going to have 1 minus the variable cost over the sales. Okay. 1 minus variable cost over sales here. Now, a big thing that I think students struggle with a bit is, especially if you consider yourself kind of on the just a little weaker on math. I'm not going to say poor at math, just weaker is what we see there. With this, what you kind of notice a little bit is that we've got some stuff in the denominator, we've got some stuff in the numerator. So when we work on our math skills, we need to make sure we're practicing our order of operations. And don't stress here because order of operations, I think, for the RD exam is going to stay pretty simple most of the time. I don't think we're going to have to go back to algebra most of the time. So let's just stick with that there. Now, looking at this order of operations for this problem, folks, let me know in the chat, what is the first thing that I should do in this problem? What would be the first thing that we should work on for this problem here? What do you think? What would be your first thing you would work on? Good. Yep. So Peyton let us know and Maheen let us know as well. So we're going to start with our first thing. Good. So we're going to start it for order of operations. We're going to do our variable divided by sales. Okay. That will be the first thing you work on in this problem. Be variable cost over sales. That'll be your very first thing that you work on here. Then, once we've done the variable cost over sales, what are we going to do next? Well, then we would do 1 minus whatever value we get for the variable cost over sales, right? Then let me know in the chat what's the final thing we would do once we have this number in the denominator. What would you say is the final thing that you were going to do for this question? What would you say? Final thing that we would do is then take that fixed cost divided by that number in the denominator. Absolutely good, Maheen. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Now, to give you some little tips and tricks here to help with the memorization a little bit, I just wanted to kind of give you little clues to help you out along the way if I can. So I'm just going to make a note of this little clue here. This is just my idea that I came up with. It doesn't apply for all families, but I put fixed is F. Fixed is F. F stands for father, father at the head of the table. Okay. So fixed cost is always going to be on top when it comes to break even point. And that can be your trick to help remember is the father is always sitting at the head of the table in this case. Okay. It's good to find tricks like that to help you along the way. All right. Very good. So I've got some empty values here a little bit as we kind of go through. I want to, there we go. Good. So I'm going to, sorry, my screen is just catching up a little bit here, folks. Pardon me. No, there we go. See, I told you, you guys, you're going to have to be patient with me. All right. Perfect. So down here, I'm pulling this right up for us. I've got a practice problem for us to work on. And so if you're just really early on in the process or you feel like you need a lot of assistance right here, here's what I've got is a little problem for us to look at together on the bottom left. Okay, so we're looking right down here on the bottom left. So in this problem, what we have is I've given you some numbers. I have my fixed cost of $10,000. I gave you a variable cost of 20,000 or excuse me, of $5,000 in sales of $20,000. Okay. So I've given you those numbers. Now, if you listen to my recent episode, what I was doing on a not my most recent episode, but the one before, is I talk you through the way to approach calculations. So if you haven't listened to that, go listen to that one about question strategy because I'm really trying to give you some good clues as to how to go through these things. The biggest thing that I told you to do was start with plugging some numbers in. That was the big thing. So let's plug some numbers in and write our formula down. We know what our formula is. We just reviewed it at the top. So what I've done here is I've plugged in those numbers. I placed our 10,000 on top. I did 1 minus 5,000 divided by 20,000 here. Okay. So that is your formula, nice and set up for you right there. What you kind of notice here already, and what you should notice is I didn't give you any extra values. I didn't give you any junk, as I call it in this case. But if I have given you junk, like let's say operating cost, right? If I'd given you the operating cost, for instance, a lot of students will freeze up and they'll go, well, Zach, what am I supposed to do with this operating cost? Guess what? You're not supposed to do anything with it because you know what your formula or your equation is supposed to be. And once you have that on paper, you kind of have a template for what to plug where. And that's super helpful, especially if you get caught up in the junk numbers, because then you have that template to work through. So let's work through this break even point problem together. I put my 10,000 on top, 1 minus 5,000 over 20,000. All of you told me per order of operations, the first thing I had to do was to do 5,000 divided by 20,000 here. 5,000 divided by 20,000. Now, we don't need to do that work in our head, of course. We want to use the calculator to help, but I always do recommend putting it on paper, folks. So make sure you're at least putting it on paper. So I do 5,000 divided by 20,000, and you can do this along with me. And when I did that, I ended up with 1 minus 0.25. So 5,000 divided by 20,000 was 0.25 there. Okay. Very good. Very good. Then I'm going to do my stay in the denominator here. I'm staying in the bottom. I will do 1 minus 0.25. And when I do that, I'm going to get a value of 0.75. 0.75 is what I'm going to get for that one there. Okay. Sorry, just jumping around a lot, folks. Let's see. Oh, that's much easier. Perfect. Perfect. Good. So I have my 0.75 in the denominator there, and I have my 10,000 on top. So now all I have to do is 10,000 divided by 0.75. And when I plug that into my calculator, I ended up with 13,333 and 33 cents. Okay. Again, as you notice, my value or my units that I got at the end, it was a dollar amount. That's what it was, right? So I know I've got my dollar amount. I know I've plugged everything in correctly, and I know now what my best answer is. So let me know, chat. Did that seem easy to you? Did that seem a little more difficult? What are your thoughts on how a problem like that feels? Does it feel about the same as it did for you? Or what do you think as far as that goes? What would you say? Easy. Nice, Peyton. Good, good, easy. Yep, easier. Good, Becky. Glad to hear that. Awesome. Yep, just need to practice and Ruby, you nailed it. Practice is what's going to really make this perfect. Certainly, it's just going to be doing reps with this type of stuff to feel nice and familiar there. Excellent. Now let's flip over to the other side and let's do a little action where we're now going to do our units. I think the units one is another fun way to kind of go about it a bit. So let's look at those together here. Okay. So then for our units, remember our formula is a bit different here. It's less complex, and that's the good news. The father, the fixed is always at the head of the table. So we know fixed cost is going to be on top. But on the bottom, things look different. So make note. On the bottom, what we have is we have our selling price minus the variable cost. Okay. Selling price minus variable cost. In this case, selling price and sales, they're very similar as far as where we're deriving the number from. The difference is sales is like a big dollar amount in sales. Selling price, however, is just the selling price for that one item. Okay, it's just that one item that we're talking about. Same with the variable cost. When I'm on that other formula, variable cost is a big dollar amount, right? But for this problem here, variable cost is just what it costs me to make one unit. Okay. That's all it is right there, just one unit. So we know for order of operations how we're going to go through this, right? We're going to do our selling price minus the variable cost. That's going to be the first thing that we do here. Then we would take the fixed cost divided by that value. Okay, we're all pretty familiar with how that works. But let's make sure we kind of just get a little clue here, just a bit. Okay. If you ever find yourself a little bit confused about, well, Zach, when do I use sales? When do I use selling price? Which number is which? I gave a little clue here that I just need to pull up a little easier. Again, our tech will get better as we go along, folks. Selling price is always a bigger number than variable cost. Okay. Selling price is always a bigger number than what our variable cost is here. And that's because, if variable cost is how much it costs for me to make the item, that shouldn't be higher than the selling price. There wouldn't be any scenario in which my variable cost is greater than my selling price. So in this case, selling price is always greater than variable cost. If you're getting a little confused here, or if you flip-flop those, for instance, you would end up with a negative in this denominator and not a positive number. We don't need any negatives in this example. So selling price is always greater than variable cost. So selling price is always going to be selling minus variable there. Okay, good. Any questions in the chat about this formula before we do a practice question together? Okay. All right. So let's take a look then. Mhm. Scroll a little faster. There we go. It's very sensitive since I'm doing it on a PDF. At some point, what we'll have is I'm going to have this pulled up on a separate tablet. And what we'll do is we'll see this kind of live as we go through stuff. For now, this is kind of what we're working with just as I get things figured out. So thanks for being patient with me, folks. I know it's just a little annoying seeing the screen bounce around, but I promise I'll work on it and it will get better over some time here. Okay. Good. So for this next problem, I've got some numbers right here for you. And if you want to get started with them, you certainly can. Those should come back into frame here soon. Fixed cost for this one is $500. Variable cost is $4 per taco. Let's assume we're doing a taco truck here. And then the selling price is going to be $6 per taco there. Okay. We already know what selling price is because we know it's the bigger number of those two. Okay. Good. Yeah, I'll go nice and slow here. Thanks for the feedback here, folks. Okay. All right. So this formula should pop in front of you. I kind of set up our formula a little bit here. Break even unit is equal to 500 divided by 6 minus 4. Okay. That's where I plugged in my numbers right there to get us set up. So we've got that all set here, which is good. No, no, come on, participate. There we go. Then what we'll have next, if my little window wasn't in the way of us seeing this, after we've done 6 minus 4, you're now going to have 2 in that denominator, right? So 2 will be in the denominator, not 6 minus 4. It'll just be the 2 there, as we can see here. Okay. Then our final step will just be to do 500 divided by 2. Okay. 500 divided by 2. And once we do 500 divided by 2, again, use your calculator if it helps you there. It's always good to kind of do. Mhm. Once we've done the 500 divided by 2, you would end up with your final value of 1,000 tacos. So 1,000 tacos would be the total amount of tacos that you would need to produce for your food truck or sell in order to break even there. Okay, you see that then. Okay, good. So, what questions do you all have about break even points right now? Did those seem nice and straightforward? Does it seem like those make sense to you? And do you understand the difference between those two formulas now? That's the big key point that I want to emphasize here is do we understand there? Mhm. Yes, so Priscilla asked, we do 500 divided by 2. Yep, absolutely. So on, no, come back now. There we go. It'll get better, I promise. It'll get easier. Okay. So we had our 500 that was on top. That was our fixed cost there. Then we did the 6 minus 4. Let's see. Oh, you got 250. Okay. Well, what did I do here? 500 divided by 2. So if I did 500 times 2, that would be 1,000, which is not the right answer here, right? You are all correct. If I do 500 divided by 2, that's correct. That would be 250. Okay. So you are all correct there. That would be 500 divided by 2, and that would be 250. See, I just kind of flipped those in my head on accident, did 500 times 2. That's a really good lesson as to why you do want to check your work. Okay. Even on the exam, when you're doing questions like this, you just want to make sure that, hey, check your work a little bit. For me, I probably just rushed through this way too fast, did 500 times 2, and thought 1,000 tacos. But if I had checked my work then at the top, I wouldn't have ended up with the correct answer there. So you are all correct. 500 divided by 2 would be 250 tacos. So that would be our best answer for this one here. Good. Thanks for catching me, everyone. That's very good. I'll be sure to get that corrected for sure. Good. All right. Excellent. Well, if we all feel ready, hopefully the rest of these look better. Let's go ahead and let's move on to our EP and AP here. So let's move on to EP and AP here as a group. Let's get that all loaded up. Okay, good. So the first thing we're going to go through is going to be EP and AP, but we're only going to talk about weight first. Okay. EP and AP weight is what we're going to look at right here. So I zoomed this out just a little bit so we can all get a nice little look there. Peyton, would you ever need to calculate the variable cost on the exam? So think of it, kind of think of it like this, Peyton. If you had more than likely not, for these types of problems, more than likely not. If they did ask for the variable cost, it would likely would be the cost to make the item, right? I think they're going to give that usually to you a lot of the time. I haven't had to calculate it most of the time. So I think you can feel confident that they should give you a variable cost, especially for a break even point formula, because they're just trying to say, hey, do you know how to use this formula? Good question there. All right. All All right, EP and AP. Now, everyone, I work in food service, so I use EP and AP very often in my job all the time. So it's a great little topic to talk about, and I really just want to simplify this. I think a lot of the times we really put a lot of way too much effort on EP and AP, and we just need to simplify this as much as we can for ourselves here. Okay, so I'm just getting that pulled up for you. Now, what I have here is on the left side, I have how we're going to calculate the edible portion, and on the right will be the as purchased. Let's make sure we understand all this. Edible portion. If I have a cucumber, okay, cucumber, let's say I remove the ends of the cucumber and maybe I remove the skin. That fleshy part that's inside the cucumber, that is my edible portion. That's what we're calling that. Or let's say a pineapple, right? I cut the top off the pineapple. I cut the sides off the pineapple. I remove the core of the pineapple. And then that pineapple fruit that's left over, that's my edible portion, right? So always just remember edible portion is just that edible part that you get out of the fruit, the vegetable, the meat, whatever it may be. As purchased on the right is just how you purchase this item. So if you purchased it raw, which most of the time in these examples we are, if we use the pineapple example, when I have the whole pineapple, that is the as purchased. That's how it comes there. Okay. Does that feel clear to everyone? Do you feel like you understand the difference between edible portion and as purchased? Or are there any questions about that that don't seem clear? What do you think? What would you say? Cool. Excellent. Excellent. So now we need to just give you a couple clues to help you with knowing which is which a lot of the time. Okay. For edible portion, and we're talking weight here, folks. So how much this weighs. We're not talking cost right now, just how much it weighs. Okay. Yeah, Priscilla, I'm going to say this one more time for you, or two or 10 times, however many times I need to say it. Edible portion, that is the edible part of the fruit, vegetable that I eat. So it's the part of the pineapple that I can eat. The as purchased is just the whole pineapple with the skin, with the core, with the top on it. That's what that as purchased is there. Okay. The edible portion, the part that we can eat, is always smaller. It's always smaller, folks. And that's going to be a big clue to you here. And again, just talking weight here, not talking cost. Okay. So with this, EP is always smaller. So as you're doing these problems, if you're looking for the edible portion, and let's say you calculate it and you end up with a big number, well, then you know you might have done something wrong more than likely because edible portion should always be smaller than your as purchased. Because again, you're taking off the sides, you're taking off the skin, you're losing weight on the product to make it the edible portion. Okay. EP is always smaller. As purchased is always larger. And that's your clue for these problems because then you can know, okay, if I do this problem and I end up with something like, let's say you calculate the as purchased and it's smaller than your edible portion, well, you know you did something wrong because it should always be a bigger number than your edible portion. That's my big clue. And that's my big tip for going through these actually is just to say, always know that difference when it comes to the weight of an item. Okay. And I'll look out for questions in the chat if anyone has any about that. Now, this is how I want to help you kind of to calculate these a little bit. Let's just focus on edible portion right now on the left. So with that edible portion, what we're kind of looking at here is in order to find the edible portion, you're going to take your as purchased weight of the item and you're going to multiply it by the yield. Okay. The yield that you multiply it is the yield is usually it's a percentage, right? So 90%, 75%, 1%, whatever it is. The yield is what you're actually getting out of the product. Mhm. Mhm. Good. Yep. So, with that, whenever I do multiplication, so to help you with knowing how to find edible portion, again, edible portion is going to be smaller, it's going to be a little number. To find it, I'm going to take my as purchased and I'm going to multiply it by the yield as a decimal. Let me repeat that. To find the edible portion, I'm going to multiply the as purchased times the yield as a decimal. So if my yield is 90%, which is high, I would do my as purchased times zero point 0.9. Okay. Big key point to remember on how to work through these is that you're going to multiply it by a decimal. Okay. And whenever you multiply something by a decimal, if you multiply something times zero point 0.9 or times zero point 0.5 or zero point zero 0.01 or anything, you're always going to get a smaller value. And that's how you know you're getting the edible portion there, is because if I multiplied it by a decimal, I'm going to get a smaller number. It's so important to me that you all understand that. So let's take a pause. In the chat, if I'm not clear about that, tell me now and I'm happy to repeat that. Okay. I'm just going to take a look at these other comments here. Mhm. Maheen, yep, you're always going to convert the yield percentage to a decimal. Absolutely. Great question. Mhm. Good. Yeah, Michael, I'll get to your comment here in just once we go through this example of kind of what types of keywords to look for a little bit when it comes to that. Okay. Seems like we're doing well there. Now, let's look at the as purchased on the right here, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about that. Again, the as purchased is going to be that raw item is equal to the edible portion divided by the yield. Okay. And Maheen asks, what does the yield mean? That's a great question, Maheen. I wish I had a piece of produce with me in here. Okay. All right. So, Maheen, let's say this is a blue cucumber. Okay. This is a blue cucumber, not a water bottle. This is a blue cucumber. Okay. What the yield is what I'm actually getting out of this blue cucumber. So let's picture it's a raw cucumber. On the raw cucumber, I remove the top out of it, or I remove the sides. Maybe I remove the skin off the cucumber. Okay. What the yield is saying is the yield is the number or the value. It's the percentage of that original and what it is now. So for a cucumber, Maheen, a cucumber has a yield of, let's say, 90%. Okay. Because on a cucumber, all you do is you remove the top, the bottom, and the skin. Okay. So what that 90% means is that 90% of that cucumber is edible. Only 10% of it is inedible. Does that make sense? Inedible in quotes, because you could still eat it, right? So, Maheen, let me make sure that that makes sense to you. The yield is just what you're getting out of the product. That's all it is there. Okay. So, for the as purchase, like I said, we're going to do edible portion divided by the yield. And this is your key point here, folks, is that if I divide by a decimal, because we know the yield is going to be a decimal, when you divide by a decimal, your number is always bigger. You'll always get a bigger number. So that's going to be your key clue there, as to know, okay, I did this thing right here based on that. Okay, good. Let's apply it with some problems here a little bit, okay? See if I can zoom in a little more. And let's go one more page over so we can pull that up. Yep, Lauren's green with some green notes in there too. All right. So since we were just talking about as purchased, I'm going to give that a second just to catch up on the live there. I'm going to have a nice question for you here. Okay. So here's the question that I have for you. I want you to find the as purchased of this item. So what we have is the as purchased is equal to the edible portion divided by the yield. Okay. I gave you the edible portion as a weight. On the exam, more than likely, they're going to give it to you as a weight here. Let's plug in some numbers. I'm going to take that edible portion and plug it in blue here. 16 ounces is going to be on top. Then my yield is going to be 0.80 because we know that we're going to make it so that it's going to be a decimal. We don't want to leave it as a percentage. We're going to make it a decimal there. So as we look at this, we then just have to take 16 ounces divided by 0.80, and then you are going to get that math done. And when you do, you end up with the as purchased of 20 ounces. Okay. So what that means is that when I bought this orange, big old orange, this orange weighed 20 ounces when I bought it at the store. Let's picture my hand here is the orange, right? So I bought it at the store and it was 20 ounces. Then once I cut the sides off and removed some of the core of that orange, what was left was what the edible portion is, but I didn't know what the as purchased was. So once I calculated that, I found out that the orange that I bought at the store was 20 ounces when I bought it. And then once I trimmed it, prepped it, peeled it, the edible portion on it was 16 ounces, as was given in the question there. Okay. Now, what questions do we have on this problem as we're taking a look at it? Does that seem nice and clear, or what questions might you have? Okay. Nice and clear. Okay. Seems good. I'll keep an eye out just for some clues there a little bit. Okay. Let's go back over to that edible portion, calculating that now. And let's talk about this pineapple. Priscilla, are we always going to be given the yield? In some manner, yes. So, to be clear here, you are never going to have to memorize a yield of a pineapple. You're never going to need to know that. Nope, you're never going to need to know that. There are times, and this kind of has to do with what Michael asked a little bit. There might be times where they give you how much waste there is, okay? How much waste there is. So let's say in my orange example here, I'm going to bump over to the right here just for a minute so we can see that. For my orange question that we looked at for the as purchased, let's say I did not give you the yield. Let's say I gave you the waste. What would be the waste percentage on this orange? If my yield is 80% here, what would be your waste for the orange? What do you think? Yep, good. Yep, Ruby gave us an idea there. That's good. hmm So your waste on that orange is 20%. And there are times where they're going to give you that in a question and say, the orange has a waste of 20%. Therefore, you just need to find out what the yield is by doing 100 minus that waste. Okay? Yep. Very good, Maheen. Very nice there. So, Michael, hopefully that helps you out a little bit with that question there of to know the difference between the yield and the waste that we see there. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at this edible portion question now. I hate to blame the technology, but you cannot believe how excited I'm going to be once I get this all figured out. I had it all figured out, and then it didn't work right before, so that's okay. That's like how it goes. All right. Awesome. So let's take a look at this pineapple question now. So, for this pineapple question, what they told you is that your as purchased weight for your pineapple is 2 pounds. Your yield on the pineapple is 55%. Okay. Meaning your waste is like 45% for the pineapple. Not that we need that here. I just wanted to make that nice and clear. So now let's work through this question. Edible portion is equal to the as purchased times the yield. We know that edible portion is going to be a smaller number, right? We know that's going to be the case. So let's plug in some numbers. 2 pounds times 0.55. Once we do that math, we ended up with the edible portion on our pineapple, which originally was 2 pounds. After I prepped it, peeled it, cored it, all the things, it now weighs 1.1 pounds. Now you all got me checking my work, so let's double check Zach's work. 1.1 pounds is what we see right there. Okay. Smaller number versus bigger number. This will serve you so well when it comes to EPAP. You will not freeze up during the exam because you will know bigger versus smaller. What I need to focus on there. All right, chat. What questions do you have about this AP and EP weight as we're taking a look right here? What do you think? Other questions on this here because it's about to get just a little more complicated, just a little bit, but not too much. Okay. Seems like we're all doing good. So now we're going to go ahead and move on here. We'll keep an eye out for more questions should any pop up. Okay. Way too much. Now, let's take a look at EP and AP cost. Cost is where we're going to next, okay? So if you finally got EP and AP weight down, you're fine. Okay? You're totally fine. This AP and EP cost, I don't want it to further confuse you, but we have to know how to do this for exam day. So I'm going to make sure that you know how to do it. Okay. Now, let's take a look on the left side. When we are talking the cost of the products we buy, these formulas change. They actually are the opposite of what they were when we were talking the weight of the items. Let me repeat that. These formulas are the opposite of what they were when we were doing AP and EP weight. Completely the opposite. Okay. Four on the left side for edible portion cost. What does that mean? Well, edible portion cost is like saying that you went to the store and you bought, let me say, let's say you went to the store and you bought peeled carrots, peeled and chopped carrots. Okay. And you went to the store and you bought those at $2 a pound. So when you bought them peeled, chopped, shredded, whatever it was, that was the edible portion cost that you bought them when they are in that form. So, edible portion cost is how you're buying these items when they've already been trimmed, peeled, cleaned, shredded, whatever it may be. As purchased cost is the cost that you're buying these items when they are in the whole and raw form. So instead of it being a peeled and chopped carrot, it's going to be a whole carrot with the top on it and everything and the skin and everything there. So edible portion is that prepped carrot. As purchased is that raw, unpeeled carrot that we see there. hmm Yeah, Maheen. So absolutely. EP cost is like those pre-cut fruits and veggies that you see in the store that are in the package with the plastic wrap. hmm Good. Now I'll ask you folks, when you buy that stuff in the store, what do you think is more expensive? To buy my veggies pre-chopped, pre-cleaned, pre-trimmed? Or is it more expensive to buy my veggies in the whole form? Which one's more expensive, you think? Pre-clean, right? So once they're pre-done for me, that is always going to be more expensive. So you remember before when we were doing EP weight, and I told you about how the edible portion is always smaller when it comes to weight? When it comes to cost, folks, that's the opposite. Edible portion cost, when you buy those prepped veggies in the store, they are always more expensive. Your price is always higher for the edible portion item compared to the as purchased item. When you buy raw veggies, whole, and then prep them themselves, you always save money by doing that. Let's make sure that's clear there. Is there any questions or confusion about why edible portion cost is a bigger number and why as purchase cost is a smaller or cheaper number? Does that seem nice and clear? Seems like we're doing good there. Yield for these is just going to stay the same as we were when we were talking weight. Okay, so yield doesn't do anything funky. Yield is as it is. Okay, so that's not going to change at all. Let's take a look at some questions for this. So let's start with let's start on the left this time. Catching up, catching up. There we go. All right, don't touch a thing. So let's use the pineapple example now as this catches up a little bit. So for this pineapple, when we go to the store, the pineapple costs $2 per pound with the yield of 55%. Now, I know that the edible portion cost on this pineapple is going to be higher than the as purchased. I know it's going to be more expensive per pound for this pineapple when it's in the edible portion form. That tells me I need to divide. So I take my formula, edible portion cost is equal to as purchased divided by the yield. I plug in $2 per pound on top. And in the yield, I put that 0.55. Then I do 2 divided by 0.55. And because I'm doing dividing by a decimal, I know I'm going to get a bigger number here. 2 divided by 0.55, since Zach needs to check his work a lot better, is going to be $3.64 per pound. Do you see how that's more expensive than it was for the as purchased amount there? And is there any confusion as to how we got to that number? And if you are confused, let us know. Let's talk through it together. Okay. Looks like we're all doing pretty good. So you must all be feeling nice and confident on that now. Now let's go take a look at as purchased cost here. So for this same example, we're going to have an edible portion cost of $5 per pound for these oranges. The yield is going to be 80% on the orange. My formula, I know my as purchase is going to be cheaper, smaller number, right? Cheaper. So I'm going to do as purchase cost is equal to edible portion times the yield. I'm going to plug in the $5 per pound as the edible portion, and then I'm going to do the 80% there. 5 times zero point 0.8 times a decimal is going to be a smaller number. Mhm. So I see a question in the chat from Priscilla here, and I wanted to address that a little bit. So what Priscilla mentioned was setting up the triangle a little bit, and I avoided talking through the triangle today just a bit, just because I didn't want to further add a little more pressure on this computer to do this. Um, Laura Ann, do you still use the triangle method, or do you rely on not using the triangle method? I'm curious what you think, just because I know we've talked about this before a little bit. So, can you let us know, Laura Ann, which do you use if you're here? Okay, that's all right. So, Priscilla, here's what my tip is for you when it comes to this. Okay. This triangle, it's a little bit of a trick way that people can use to figure this out. I don't like it. I don't. I've taught it to many students who do like it, but what kind of Lorianne is saying, and even what Ruby said in the chat here, is that what the method that I've been teaching students, Priscilla, is that to understand which number is bigger and smaller. Okay. I if the triangle is confusing you, it's not working for you. We might need to drop that. If you actually understand that as purchase cost in this case is going to be a cheaper value, if you understand and can critically think and put that together, you do not need that triangle. You should not need that triangle at all because you should be able to understand that it's going to be a smaller number and then understand that you would have to multiply by a decimal instead of dividing. And Priscilla, even if you made that mistake of accidentally doing that, you'd still be able to critically think and say, oh, wait, as purchase is supposed to be a smaller and cheaper number. So I must have done something wrong and I need to look at my formula again. So if the triangle isn't working for you too well, then my recommendation is maybe stick with what I'm teaching you here because I think it's going to actually teach you how to know and understand things a little better here. Yep. 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 The triangle. So there's a couple other people in the chat just saying the triangle also mixes them up. It works for some. I would say it's only worked for 25% of the students that I've worked with. Has it worked? 75% just get success out of just understanding what I'm teaching you right here. Oh boy. All right. Yep. Very good, Joanne. Yep. Whichever number is bigger or costlier, then it needs to be found by division. Absolutely. Good. Yep, that does make it easier. So right. Okay, folks. So then our next thing that we're going to go through, we're almost at the top of the hour, just since tech was being a little slow for us. But if you can stay on with us just a little longer, I'm going to just talk through our next element, which is selling price. It'll probably take another 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll wrap things up right after that. So if you got to run, feel free to run, but I'm going to stay on for a little bit and talk through selling price a bit now. Okay, so let's talk through selling price, not one you want to miss. But also remember, if you cannot stay for now, the live is going to be uploaded on the RD Exam Ready YouTube page. So if you want to watch it later, just go watch it later. It's no pressure at all. And you can always follow up with questions from me too. Okay. Selling price is a doozy. In the hundreds of students that I've worked with, and it's definitely up to hundreds and possibly to thousands. Selling price has been one of the hardest things for students to wrap their head around because it's complex. It is complex a bit, or sometimes it doesn't need to be. So today, what I want to do is just simplify that for you. Okay, just simplify it, give you just a little bit to walk away with today. My goal is that you feel just 1% more confident on selling price. And if we can get more than that, I'm happy with it. So, first thing, first things first, always, right? I'm going to call this the traditional selling price. Okay. So, I'm going to let that, oh boy, catch up. All right. So, what I have here on the left that I'm going to show you here once this screen figures itself out, again, so sorry, is that selling price traditional. That's what I call it there. So, per sale, the prepped product is going to be the EP. Prepped product will be EP there, per sale. For selling price, I call this formula traditional. You can call it whatever you want. I just call it traditional. When we use this, you are only looking at the food cost itself. Repeating that again and again and again. For traditional selling price, my recommendation is that you just focused on the food cost in the food cost percentage. Okay. The food cost being the cost of the item, whether that's the orange we were looking at. In the food cost percentage is normally a number that is already predetermined by a restaurant or by a retail location. And it's like saying, hey, we want our food cost percentage to be X percent or stay right around this area. Okay. What you notice with this traditional selling price is I'm only talking food, only food. I'm not bringing labor into this thing at all. Okay. So just focus on this right now. To find the selling price of an item just using the food cost, I would do the food cost in dollars and I would divide that by the food cost percentage. Okay. So for finding the selling price there, I would do the food cost divided by the food cost percentage as a decimal, folks, as a decimal. Okay. So make sure you know it would be food cost in dollars divided by the food cost percentage as a decimal. Now, you already know if I divide by a decimal, I'm going to get a larger number. Hence, why selling price is going to be a larger number than your food cost in dollars. Okay. So again, food cost in dollars divided by food cost percentage. Is there any questions in the chat just about this traditional right here? Do you feel pretty comfortable with the traditional type of food cost percentage type stuff? Um, we'll get into the more confusing stuff in just a minute, but I want to make sure we're nice and concrete on this right now. Seems like we're doing great. Now, let's do a little practice problem on this one. Feel good about traditional. I'm glad to hear it, Peyton. Perfect. Doo-doo-doo. Sorry, one more page down. Give that a second to catch up for us here. So I'm going to give you a problem here for us to use to find the selling price of a sandwich. So this sandwich here, it costs for the food cost of it with the bread, the cheese, the meat, the lettuce. That sandwich is $5 in food cost, okay? All of the ingredients together cost $5. The food cost percentage, which they're likely going to give you, is 20%. So I'm going to plug my numbers in once I've written my formula out. Food cost dollars divided by food cost percentage as a decimal. $5 divided by 0.20. That's what we're going to see there. Once we do 5 divided by 0.20, and Zach's going to check his work. Looks good. Once you do 5 divided by 0.20, you're going to end up with a larger number here, right? And that larger number for this question would be $25. That would be your selling price for this sandwich. Must be a very good sandwich, right? To me, traditional selling price feels very straightforward. Feels, I'm not going to call it easy just because easy is so relative to all of us, but it's pretty straightforward. There's not much complexities to it. If you do have questions about traditional selling price, please speak out in the chat because I want to help you get this thing down and locked in. So let me know if you do have questions about this traditional right now. We seem like we're doing pretty good. Okay. Who's ready for it to get a little more difficult? Always is like that, right? It's never easy. It's never easy. We don't want it to be easy, right? It's a hard road to get here. Peyton, yeah, you might have to add up the ingredient cost for the formula. Like let's say it's a quiche. Maybe with the quiche, they give you the price of the eggs, the onions, the oil, and you might need to add that up to get the food cost. I don't think you're going to see that often, but I think it's always possible. And I think you could do that. And I think we could all get there. All right. Now, stick with me. I'm just going to go through this just nice and slowly. It's all right. Okay. So now what do we do when there's a problem that gives us the food cost and the labor cost? Food cost and the labor cost. So now we're going to be looking on the right side here to know about how we're going to go through this process to use food costs and labor costs. Sorry about this screen, folks. I just want to get this pulled up so you can see everything I have to show you. Sorry, that's so frustrating. Again, it'll get better, I promise. I'm going to get my OBS figured out here soon. Had it figured out, like I said. Okay. All right. Thanks for your patience there. My recommendation is to avoid confusing yourself. If you need to find the selling price using food and labor, my recommendation is to use what we call the markup factor. Okay, the markup factor is what that's called. The markup factor is just a multiplier, folks. That's all it is. It is a multiplier that you use. So it doesn't have any units or anything, it's just a multiplier. We find this multiplier by doing this formula that you see on this first line. We do 1 divided by our food cost percentage as a decimal plus our labor cost percentage as a decimal. Again, they should give us these numbers so that we can calculate them. Okay. We know of order of operations, we would do everything in the denominator in the bottom first, and then 1 divided by the decimal that we get there. This will make more sense in the next practice problem. The prime cost, as I call it, and as it's usually called, is when you take your food cost in dollars plus your labor cost in dollars. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to find your total cost for this item, not just using the food cost, but also using the labor cost in dollars as well. Okay? So Maheen, good question here. So prime cost is always in dollar value. That is true. But Maheen, for the markup factor will probably not be a decimal. I know that seems confusing, but let's say my food cost percentage is 10% and my labor cost percentage is 10%. So we're looking at this markup factor here. If you do 1 divided by those 2, you end up with a number. Let's see, I'll just do it. 1 divided by zero point 0.2 should be 5. You end up with usually a whole number, Maheen. So it's not gonna be a decimal usually for the markup factor. It's usually gonna be a whole number that you'll get once you do 1 divided by those 2 added together. Good question. Okay. Then how do we bring these all together? What you're gonna do is you're gonna take that markup factor, that whole number, and you are going to multiply it by that prime cost that you found by adding your food cost in dollars to your prime cost in dollars. So, like I said, my markup factor is just a multiplier. It's like saying I want to increase my bank account by a factor of 2. That's what it is there. So, when I use the markup factor, I'm going to use it as a multiplier and multiply it by the prime cost there. Okay. How are we doing so far? Are we doing good? Are we confused? What do you think? I think you're all just waiting patiently for me to kind of continue working on it. Okay. Okay. So let's take the long journey to getting this question pulled up so we can all see it. No. See, I shouldn't have I yelled at my computer. You see, I told my computer it needs to act better. And that's what I get. I should have been patient with it and let it do its thing. That's what I learned. Okay, good. Okay. So now I've got a problem for us here. I've got a salad. The salad has a food cost of $5 per salad. The food cost percentage of that salad is 20%. The labor cost for the salad is $2 per salad. And my labor cost percentage for that salad is 10% here. The first thing I wanted you to do was find your markup factor, which is your multiplier. What you're going to do is you're going to use just the food cost percentage and the labor cost percentage here to start. So we'll do 1 divided by 0.20, our food cost percentage as a decimal, plus 0.10, which was our labor cost percentage as a decimal once again. On the bottom, it would be 0.30 when you add those two together. And then you do 1 divided by 0.30, and you would end up with 3.33 as your markup factor there. 3.33 was your markup factor there. Did anyone have any trouble finding that markup factor first? Does that seem nice and easy? If you did have questions, just let me know. Now I want you to find your prime cost. So what are we going to do for our prime cost? I'm going to take my food cost in dollars, $5, plus the $2 for the labor cost to end up with a prime cost of $7. So meaning the total cost for that salad is $7 there. Okay, doing good so far. Okay. Now we're going to bring it home here. I'm going to take my markup factor of 3.33 and I'm going to use that as a multiplier and I'm going to multiply it by that prime cost that we got from the food cost in dollars and the labor cost in dollars. When I multiplied 3.33 times 7, I ended up with a selling price of $23.31. Let's check my work really quick. Times 7, 23.31 is going to be your selling price for that. Again, my recommendation is that you go ahead and just use this markup factor method when we're going to use the food cost and the labor cost. And then if you're only doing food cost, then we're going to do just that traditional there. Mhm. Priscilla, do we have to memorize these formulas? You do. You need to be familiar with these formulas. And that's really going to come with practice, Priscilla. That's the biggest key point to that is it's just going to take practice working with them to get that done. But in practice, you are going to be able to get through this. You are going to get better with these types of formulas. They are going to get easier for sure. All right. Is there any other questions tonight that you may have in the chat? I appreciate you all being extremely patient with me on the technology. Like I said, I promise I'm going to work on that over the next few weeks, get that all fine tuned so it just runs more efficiently. Yeah. If you do want to email me, you always can. I'm just going to post that email into the chat there. It's just rdexamready at gmail. Mhm. So Maheen asked, one divided food cost. So Maheen, what you're talking about is just fine. But what I kind of mentioned, Maheen, was my recommendation was that if you are just doing the food cost, I told you just to use that first formula I said. And the reason I recommend that is so that you don't confuse yourself between the two formulas. So there is a way to use markup factor just using the food cost. That's okay. But my tip is just use the traditional for one way. And then when we bring food and labor together, then go ahead and do that other way. You see, so you kind of keep those differentiated there. Yeah, and Joanne kind of asked about more PN and TPN. Joanne, I'll make a note of that, absolutely, and we'll put that on the docket in the future. Priscilla one asked about acidosis and alkalosis. That's awesome. I should be writing these down. Okay. So alk and acid, PN and TPN. Good. Well, let me get my technology figured out first so that this is less clunky for all of us. And that way you can all, because all of your brains are going way quicker than even what this computer is keeping up with. So it's funny. It's because you're all such bright RDs to be. You're ahead of me. You were checking my work along the way, and that shows you're really paying attention. So we're going to wrap it up tonight. Thank you all for joining us. I always want to say, and I always sign off by saying, happy studying to you, RD to be. I wish you the best in your journey of studying. Please reach out to me over email, Instagram, wherever you'd like to contact me. Please do. Happy studying, and I'll talk to you later. Night.